This is the solution for the file upload coding exercise, which is based on the tutorial that can be found in Tethys platform shown here. The goal of this exercise is to demonstrate how to implement file upload capabilities in Tethys apps. And ultimately this feature will be used to allow users to upload a shapefile that will be used as a clipping boundary in the app. But for this exercise, we're focusing only on the form upload and validation pieces of this. And in the next one, we'll implement the logic to do the clipping. So let's go ahead and get started. First, we'll go to the app and I'll explain what the plan is. We're going to add a button down in this area to launch a modal that will contain our upload form, kind of like what is shown here in this screenshot. Since it's in a modal, we'll have to do a few things to get the feedback working. And we'll be sure to provide lots of validation for the users as they go so that they know what they need to upload, including these instructions that we provide here in the modal. The first thing we'll do then is add that button. This will be in the viewer controller, and we'll add it using a button gizmo like we did with these other buttons. So let me scroll down and find that. So here's the plot button. I think I'll put it right under here. Let me go grab that from the tutorial. And it's fairly similar to the other buttons that we have. We give it a name, what to display on the button, and a style with some attributes. To use this in our form, we need to add this to our context so that it gets passed there. So I'll just put this right after these other buttons. Okay. Speaking of which, let's open the template and go and add that to our navigation, which is defined here in the app navigation items block. We'll just add it right under here, along with a brief explanation right above the button so the users know what it's for. Okay, and we're just using the gizmo tag that's provided by Tethys with that set boundary that we pass to the context. Let's go take a look. Refresh. Looks like Tethys is still restarting. There it is. Next, let's create our modal to hold our form. This will go in the viewer.html, and we'll put it right below the plot modal. Let me just indent that a little bit. Okay, and this looks very similar to the other modals that we've done. We'll fill in the body here with our form. But look, right now, if I refresh the page and I press this button, I can push it all day until I'm blue in the face, nothing's happening. And that's because we haven't given it the appropriate attributes to know to launch that modal. So let's go back to our button definition in the controller right here, and we'll add the data toggle and data target attributes that Bootstrap requires to be able to open the modals from a button. We'll set data toggle to modal because it's opening a modal, and data target to set boundary modal, which is the ID of our modal that we just added. So let's add the form to the body, and I'll type this out because there's a few things I want to highlight. So I'll first add a form element, and I need to add a few attributes to it. One is the method that we're going to use, and for file upload, you must use post. We also need to set the encoding type, and for file upload, we need to use this multi-part form data encoding. Then we need to set the action, which is where the form will be submitted to. You can think of this as a URL or a controller that will handle it. And we're going to leave it blank. And I'm specifying it explicitly so later down the road we know that it's this view, or rather this controller, that will handle it. When it's blank, it just submits to the same URL as the page that it's on. So our viewer controller will handle the file upload. Let's add a few other things. One is a bootstrap class. And this is just to style our form, horizontal form. And the next is an ID, so we can select it later on. We'll call it the set boundary form. I'll also add a brief description to our dialog right above the form. Or you could put it in the form if you'd like. Let's take a look. There actually won't be much to see at this point because the form is empty, but we do see our little description. So let's go back and add our file upload input. And this is a little more than just an input. We'd like to have a label on it, and we'd like it to be formatted nicely. So we're using the Bootstrap convention of putting it in a div with a form group class, and then that allows us to format it nicely. And the way it's formatted depends on this class in the form. In case of horizontal form, it'll just put the label kind of right above the input element. Now let's look at the input element. This is really the key to the file upload. Aside from setting the encoding type and the method, you have to have an input of type file. And then you also need to provide it a name, because the browser won't submit it without a name, or include it rather in the submission. So we'll call it boundary file. And then this accept parameter, at least on some browsers and some operating systems, would limit it to only being able to select zip files. Unfortunately, in our Linux version of Chrome, that's not the case, but I believe Windows, Mac users will enforce this. It just depends. So we'll put it there because we would like them to upload a zip file, but we're not going to rely on that to enforce that. So let's go take a look. Open it up, and there you go. So we've got our label above and a file, choose file button, and we could go to downloads and select a file if we'd like. But the problem is I don't have a submit button, so I can't really do anything with it. I can select the file, but I can only cancel right now. So let's go add our submit button, and we'll do this in the footer next to the cancel button. And this is another input, type submit, which is a special input. When it's embedded in a form, it will submit the form automatically. Since this is outside of our form tag, what we need to do is add this form attribute and give it the ID of our form, set boundary form. Okay, and then it will know that when I push the submit button, it needs to submit that form. I also need to provide it a name, and I provided an ID as well for styling if I'd like to modify those later. The value of a type submit input is what's displayed on the button. So now our form should be built out. Let's try this. Choose a file, open, set. CSRF verification. And I kind of did this on purpose because we're using a post request. And this is what will happen if you do not provide a CSRF token. Okay? In the tutorial, it tells you to put this so that you don't run into this error. But I left it out so that we could illustrate this. And it does this as a security precaution. So let's go add our CSRF token. It's got to be in our form. So I'll just put this token right here above this other input element, again, inside my form. And then we'll go hit back and hard refresh the page to make sure we get that token, Control-Shift-R. Now we should be able to submit the form because we have that token. And it submits, but nothing really happened because we haven't implemented that logic. That's what's next.